Hey, everybody, welcome to the Hot and Hauter podcast. I'm Arti.
And I'm Dan.
Every episode, I give Dan a recipe and we find out if it's
A success,
or a disaster.
nevertheless, it's bound to be an adventure. Let's get to cooking.
Hey, Dan, how's it going, buddy?
Hey, what's going on, bud?
Not much. So, how was your whole week?
My week was good. The mac and cheese that we made this week is still sitting heavily in my stomach because it is a very hearty meal.
Yes, it is. It is.
But no, the week's been good. Just kind of getting back in the swing of things, coming down from some family travels and situations like that, and just trying to get back in the routine. Kiddo's got a day off of school tomorrow, so I got to find a way to entertain him. Maybe I can make him edit the
Nice.
next podcast.
There you go. Or you can get him on his next build.
I do need to get back into that. He's been in trouble though.
Oh, no.
He's doing good at school, but then he comes home and saves it all for us.
Oh, yeah. That sounds familiar.
So, but no, yeah, my week's been good. How about you, bud?
Good. Made some mac and cheese. Just did normal stuff. Just your normal week. So, nothing crazy.
For sure. Okay. Well, this mac and cheese, you've actually in our off podcast discussions have mentioned this dish a couple times as if you're like very fond and proud of it. Is this one of your own concoctions?
Yeah. So this is my mac and cheese recipe.
Okay.
Which means I just ripped off a bunch of other people's and combined it in the way I liked it, how I like the flavors. So
I'm finding plagiarism is rampant in the culinary world.
I mean, you don't have a choice. Everything's already been made. So you really just grab. What I do is I grab a couple recipes and find what I like in each of them, and I'll combine them. And if I like what I did, I write it down.
I think that's totally. I mean, if you think about it, the music industry is kind of the same way.
Well, all
yeah,
artistic
yeah,
endeavors are.
for sure.
Some famous person said that I don't know who it is, but essentially all art is theft.
To a degree, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's just changing something that's already come before you.
it's a matter of perspective.
But there's nothing wrong with that.
No, until it's copyrighted.
Oh yeah, of course. But luckily, you can't copyright a recipe yet.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know. Can you copyright a book that a recipe is in?
Yes, you can copyright a book, but you can't copyright recipes per se.
Yeah, copyright is a real funny issue. Side story here. With my musical background, I kind of have this little nugget of information. There is a composer by the name of John Cage, and he composes contemporary music. And one of his songs was called 4 minutes and 33 seconds, I believe. And basically, the song, from what I'm to understand, is the ambient noise of the hall as the player sits at the piano for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. Doesn't play a note.
Okay.
So it's virtually silence to a degree. I believe, I don't know exactly when, and I know I might get crucified for not knowing the exact dates by some listener out there. It was blah blah blah. Sorry. But there was a CD compilation of contemporary music that put that song on their CD, 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence on their CD, and they didn't copyright protect themselves. And I believe John Cage's camp came back and sued them over 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence and won.
Oh my God.
And won royalties or something like that. I'll have to do some research because I don't know the exact details, but I was told that by one of my college professors.
Oh, jeez, man. That's so weird. All right. Cool.
All right. Mac and cheese. All right, buddy. You want to give us some history, the lowdown?
Yeah. So mac and cheese is dates back to like the 13th century, and it was originally an Italian dish, as you probably assumed. But the original dish was still macaroni and pasta. It was cooked in water, and then fresh cheese was added to it.
Okay.
Kind of similar, just very simple. Um, and then what we know as macaroni and cheese, there's a couple theories. It's interesting. So the first one is that what we know as mac and cheese today comes from something called macaroni pudding. Sounds disgusting, but
Okay.
it's essentially macaroni and cheese. You know, that's what it is.
I
They
could
just
see the
called it macaroni.
correlation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And apparently it was a very popular dish in like New England churches during like potlucks and church suppers. So
Okay.
that's one. Another one is that Thomas Jefferson on a trip to Italy fell in love with the macaroni and cheese over there so much that when he came back, um, he had a version made but with cheddar cheese, because the Italian version was Parmesan.
Okay.
So those are the two possibilities. And then what we know as like mac and cheese today, the box
Sure.
crap. Um, but it has its place.
Yeah, it
Is
does.
that in 1918, um, the well-known yellow powder was created, and it was essentially just cheese with dehydrated cheese with some other things added to it. And the whole point was to increase the shelf life of mac and cheese, so that you'd use that instead of regular cheese.
So like preservatives were added and stuff.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Um, and that kind of became the craft mac and cheese or craft dinner, depending where you're from. Um,
Okay.
yeah, that's the history of mac and cheese.
I was one of those kids that grew up on boxed mac and cheese.
Yeah, I
I'm
mean, I'm
not
pretty
trying.
sure everybody did. I
Absolutely.
have some in my pantry right now for when my kids are like, "We're hungry," and I don't wanna do anything because 'cause I'm being lazy, so I just
Yeah.
mac and cheese it. Granted, it
Well,
is Annie's mac and cheese, but
see,
still.
that's the thing I was about to ask. I grew up on mac and cheese, but I grew up on Velveeta.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The blue box, the craft was always, something that I always experienced at other people's houses, but we
Uh-huh.
had the yellow box because I guess we were just classier, so we got the shells and cheese instead of the
Dude,
elbows.
we don't do elbows in this house. Ugh. We
But
only eat shells.
but the Velveeta is like that creamy, pasty stuff as opposed to the craft is the
It's
powder.
it's essentially American cheese.
Okay.
You're
All
you're
right.
you're eating gooey American cheese, which is nothing wrong with that. American cheese is delicious. Anyone who says it's not, shut your mouth. You're just being obnoxious and you're being pretentious. It is still cheese. It's just not aged for months and years from fresh cream. It's still cheese. It's just a different process.
As you attack people who might think against American cheese, how patriotic, I feel like I should stand and salute or put my hand over my heart.
Who knew Artie was such an American hero? He'll die for his American cheese. No, it's just good, man, and it's okay. It's
Sure.
okay to like things that aren't like
Yeah, I mean, what
the
we've talked about
best.
MSG, you're eating
Oh,
it anyway.
dude, it's in everything you eat.
Yeah. But, so going back, I remember everybody, if you've done it before, you remember you boil the water, you put the pasta in, and then, 7, 8 minutes or so, 7 to 10 minutes,
Mhm,
and then milk, and then the powder or the sauce or whatever it is, and
mhm.
then you're done. It's a real
Yeah,
quick and easy thing. I know I was making it in my preteens, for me and my
yeah,
sister if mom was working or something.
yeah.
Um, so it's a staple in American dishes. It's a staple
Yeah,
it's a staple in a lot of, like, potlucks, like you said before.
yeah,
However, this was except for the noodles yeah, pinky up, everything was, I guess, from scratch, so to say.
yeah. Mhm.
Um, I mean, we didn't make our own noodles, which would have been an entirely intensive, different process,
I
save for
thought
another
about it.
day.
I
Did you
thought
really?
about it. I really did. I was
Oh,
like,
no.
"He knows how to make it. Should
Oh,
I do it?" And I was like, "No, that's too much."
I don't know, maybe at a later time, we know. I would like to do pasta, but I could see how that would be too much for this dish, so I
It
appreciate you
is.
exercising
It's a
some
little overkill.
some reserve there. Um, but yeah, so this dish pretty straightforward with regards to ingredients and preparation. But I wanted to, before we jump into this exact recipe, I wanted to add or ask you about any alternatives, differences, variances. I know like there's a million different forms of cheese out there.
Yes.
Um, the three that you have opted for this dish, and I might mispronounce this, you've got uh, white sharp cheddar,
Hmm.
Gruyere,
Gruyere, yeah.
Gruyere, and a little bit of Parmesan.
Hmm.
Um, have you done this with any other types of cheeses? Any other types of
Yeah.
amalgamations of
Oh yeah.
cheeses?
Yeah. Really, it doesn't matter what cheeses you use. You can do any assortment of cheeses as long as you have, as long as they're not a hard cheese, because a hard cheese won't turn into the best cheese sauce, which is a Mornay sauce.
Okay.
So you kind of want like the softer cheeses. So before I've made it with nothing but sharp cheddar cheese. I've done one where there's brie, Gruyere, and it's a white cheese. What is it? Fontina. I've done that one.
Never heard of that one.
Um, it's just a white cheese.
Okay.
Really, it's really nutty. So you can do it with anything. And actually, what I was going to bring up is there is a very easy one you can do where you don't need all these different cheeses and you don't even need to make the roux. So you boil the pasta, put aside, still use the same amount of milk, but then you replace all the cheese, and this kind of harkens to like Kraft or Velveeta style.
Hmm.
You just put that much American cheese in the milk. And the cool thing about American cheese is it has an additive, which is it's a salt. I'm trying to remember what the actual name of it is. But what it does is it essentially does what the roux does, that roux and the bechamel you make, but it's because of the salt that's in it, it creates a chemical reaction that any cheese you then put into that just turns into a sauce. All you need is
Interesting.
milk. All you need is milk, American cheese, and that will make a delicious mac and cheese. But then you can also add other cheeses in because that certain salt, the preservative that's in it, just has a chemical reaction where it binds the cheese with the liquid milk and just creates a sauce. So it's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. And that's what I anticipated you would say is that you can pretty much do anything as long as you just have some sort of cheese.
If you have American cheese and
Yeah.
you can use that and just milk, and you don't have to bother with the bechamel or anything like that.
Okay. I don't know. I may be interested in like not a reprint of the recipe, but a version that has those
Yeah,
steps
yeah,
included.
yeah. I'm gonna put one up.
Okay. Well, then let's jump into yours. You've called it the creamy mac and cheese.
Hmm.
This set serves about four, and it's a good size. Special tools, nothing really. Maybe like what size cooking pan or um yeah, the what's the dish called? The baking dish. What size baking dish would you recommend?
Like an 8-inch dish, like
Okay.
just like a square dish.
Okay.
Nothing crazy.
All right. All right. Well, let's get into it. So the ingredients: we've got 8 ounces of elbow macaroni and cheese or macaroni. That's about half of a bag. I believe you get the bags are about 16 ounces. The table 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil, 2 tablespoons of butter, 2 tablespoons of all-purpose flour, one grated garlic clove,
Hmm.
half a teaspoon of mustard powder, and half a teaspoon of nutmeg. I was surprised at those two. Are those common staples in
Hmm.
mac
Yeah,
dishes?
yeah. Nutmeg is very much ubiquitous with mac and cheese. It
Really?
yeah, it just adds a nice flavor. It goes well with the cheese. And on a side note, the salt that's in American cheese that allows it just to make anything melt with it is it's sodium citrate.
Oh, okay.
So you can also buy sodium citrate on its own, and you can just put that in your milk and your cheeses, and that will also cause them all to melt together because that's what sodium citrate does.
That's so
It's mol
cool.
it's molecules and shit, dude. That's cool.
Mhm. Killing them with science. All right.
Sorry, go ahead.
Then you've got a cup of panko, which was nice. I like that. We'll get to that. 2.5 cups of whole milk. I'm assuming whole for the fattiness.
Mhm,
Okay. Half a cup of heavy cream, which is the heavy whipping cream we've used
mhm,
before. 1 cup of white sharp cheddar, 1 cup of Gruyere,
Hmm.
and a quarter cup of Parmesan, and then salt and pepper to taste.
Yep.
Pretty straightforward. Preheat your oven to 350, and this is one you can actually do. You can preheat your oven the time you intend to cook this. You don't have to
Hmm.
like wait until a certain step. If you're
Yeah.
slow like me, you can get through this pretty quickly. Using a box grater, grate all your cheese and then set aside. Do not use pre-grated cheese. Specific instructions in the recipe. Why?
So pre-grated cheese has cellulose in it, which will cause it to not melt and combined with the bechamel.
Really?
Yeah, so it's essentially edible. This of course don't. This is very simplified. Um, it's well, it's essentially like edible wood fiber. It's just fiber. It's just a
Sure.
fiber they put in there to make the cheese not stick to itself while it's in a bag. But that interferes with the process of the cheese melting together.
Okay. All right. And then you explicitly say measure out your milk and heavy cream and allow both to come to room temperature. I'm
Mhm.
assuming that's for when you're combining the ingredients, you don't want it to be too cold and maybe shock
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. Um, partly boil your pasta about only 4 minutes.
Mhm.
You don't want it cooked all the way because it will finish in the oven, drain, and set aside. Um, I always thought I didn't know that you could drain the pasta and it would still soften. I thought the water constantly boiling is what caused the pasta to soften.
That is. So the reason you only do a parboil is that the liquid cheese sauce is going to cook in the oven. Will then finish the cooking process.
Oh, I see. Okay. You're cooking by osmosis.
Mhm.
Cool. Okay, I just thought like I just thought something other than that. All right, and then in a saucepan, you melt the butter, and this is where you get into these different variances of sauces. I really like how you did this here. If I felt like a video game, so add the flour and continue to whisk it. Cook this for a minute or two, and then you have a roux. It's like yay! It should become golden in color. Pour the milk and heavy cream and consistently whisking until it is smooth and starting to bubble. You now have created a bechamel sauce. Yay! It's
Do-do-do.
like an achievement.
Yep.
And then remove from heat and add in your cheese and whisk until smooth. You now have a Mornay sauce. And then you, in a baking dish, combine the pasta and the Mornay sauce and some shredded cheese on top if you would like. Now, I know I read through that a lot, and if you need to go back, you can listen to it again. But the couple things that I wanted to cover were number one, each specific section of these sauces. The first one,
Mhm.
which is the roux, which is
Mhm.
basically the the butter and the flour, right?
Yes.
Okay. Um, is that similar to what we did when we did the croque monsieur?
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Okay.
it's the same. It's the same exact sauce.
Okay, perfect. That's what I thought because it felt
Yep.
familiar. I just wanted to make sure like it wasn't some variance of that.
Mhm.
And then that kind of you need to let that kind of cook and color a little bit, and then you pour in the dairy, more dairy stuff there.
Mhm.
What is the a bechamel versus
Mhm.
a mornay is just an addition of cheese?
That's it.
Interesting. I've heard these words before. I know we've done a bechamel sometime before as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah.
I don't think we've done a mornay before.
No, not yet.
Okay. And these are just basic dishes or basic sauces that you can incorporate into a lot of different recipes?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's one. So an example is a bechamel is in a lot of things. We did the sandwich. It was on that.
Mhm.
But also, if you want a very creamy and a little bit more flavorful lasagna, you do a layer of bechamel before you put in your whatever pasta sauce or whatever. Man- I just forgot what it's called. Marinara. Wow.
Okay.
In between the layers, so it has a bunch of uses and it's in a bunch of food. But yeah, it's very prevalent in mac and cheese because you need it to make that creamy sauce because that's what it is, the creamy sauce.
Interesting. Now, a Mornay sauce, which is
Hmm.
just the bechamel with cheese,
Yes.
that's kind of like a dipping sauce to an extent. I almost kind of
It's supposed
imagine like a queso.
yeah, yeah, it's just a cheese sauce. The difference, between that and a queso is that actually, I don't know what to do. I'd have to look up a queso recipe to figure that out. But
And I'm sure there's a go
isn't
ahead, I'm sorry.
queso usually American cheese though?
That I don't know, and I was about to say, I believe there's a lot of additions of queso, a
Mhm.
lot of familial recipes and stuff. But when I was looking at this Mornay, I was looking at it going, I could just sit here and dip chips in this
Oh, 100%.
and have a good time, or put it on bread, or just I
Yeah.
could see a bunch of applications. But yeah, so it was interesting to see this sauce progress through the different stages from a roux to a bechamel to a Mornay. Um, and I just like I enjoy learning this stuff. And then, the last thing I wanted to ask about the Mornay was how runny should it be?
The Mornay sauce, so
Y
it shouldn't be liquidy. It shouldn't be like milk. It should be thick and kind of, I don't know how to what you can compare it to. Um, I get so it should be very similar to the bechamel, except have a little bit like a cheesy pull to it, I guess you could say.
Okay. Um, you're gonna hate me.
Why? What happened?
I just now started recording my video, but we're gonna let it ride. I'll do a
Hey,
goofy
hey,
face
that's
like you
okay.
did.
That's okay.
Um, but no, anyway, back on track.
Yeah.
But I'm making this Mornay, I was really like I said, I could just use this as a side dish for
Mhm.
anything. It really could be an addition to, pretzels or whatever.
Yeah.
And mine was a little runnier than I think what you're describing.
I mean,
I thought maybe it was supposed to just kind of permeate the noodles and kind
so
of get down inside.
that's not necessarily a bad thing because so there's like a range of what it can be. It can be a bit runny or it can
Hmm.
be kind of thicker and cheesier, and that's fine because in the end you're gonna cook the some of the liquid off with the macaroni in the oven anyways. So it will eventually like thicken up a bit. So
Okay.
it's not necessarily wrong that it looks like that.
Okay. Well, it didn't come out super gross or anything.
No.
It looked like a mac and cheese. It maybe was a little bit more like runny is kind of the word I'm saying. It wasn't as solidified as what you might consider
Hmm.
a sauce in a cheese mac and cheese to be. But it was
Hmm.
fine. It was totally fine.
Yeah.
And then I liked how this next step you heat up your olive oil in a little pan and you put it in the panko and you brown it.
Hmm.
I thought
Yeah.
that was kind of a nice little touch. Give it a little extra crunch.
Yeah.
And then once you're 30 minutes in the oven on the cheese mac and cheese, pull it out, put the panko on top, and I mean I let it cool for a little bit, but you can go to town.
Yeah. Yeah.
So pretty straightforward dish. I really enjoyed making this, and I tell you what, the world's toughest critic, my 7-year-old son, he loved it. He said it was
Good.
great. He kept making like, "Oh, dad, this is so good." I didn't tell him
I
half the
mean,
stuff that was in it, but he was he was in
that's the
heaven.
point. If the
Yeah.
kid eats it, then it's you did a good thing.
Hmm. Great
Uh,
dish to warm up for the lunch the next day. Just
yeah, and
super
also
easy breezy.
it's relatively cheap to make.
Yeah.
And you can make a lot if you just double this recipe. You have enough to feed 8 people. You
Hmm.
know.
I think the most expensive thing was the cheese.
Yeah, and also if you want to get around that, do what I said, which I'm gonna make an additional recipe for the American cheese one, but yeah, you can forego all that cheese and just get a bunch of American cheese, which is cheaper,
Hmm.
and you're still gonna have a delicious mac and cheese.
Okay. No, it was great. So mine was good. This is your recipe. I feel like
Mhm.
you've made this many times. How did this one turn out?
It turned out good. So boil the pasta, set it aside. Me and Joel were on like a health kick, so I used whole wheat pasta
Oh, okay.
just to see how that would go. It was good. Turned out fine. Um, I felt like it did absorb a little bit more moisture, oddly enough, I think. but
Like,
I
you could
could
tell in the texture of the noodles?
like when I was spooning out the mac and cheese, it
Okay.
wasn't as gooey as it should be, I guess. Or maybe that's just me being, trying to find a fault when there was no fault because I'm like, whole wheat noodles, but it
It's
was good.
health.
Yeah, so you just you make the bechamel a lot. So the key to a good bechamel is just you have to pay attention to it and you have to whisk it vigorously. So you cook off you combine the butter and the flour and you cook that for about a minute or two. And the purpose of that is you're removing the flour taste from it. So then you add your dairy and your milk ingredients. And right when you add it in, you just whisk very vigorously. You have to keep whisking nonstop. Don't stop because it won't combine properly or something will burn. You just have to keep going until it's nice and smooth. And
Mhm.
once it's nice and smooth, keep whisking. And then once it starts to bubble, so you see like a little bit of little bubbling happening, remove it from the heat. You're still whisking this whole time. Start dumping your cheese in, keep whisking. Just essentially, you just have to always whisk to
Okay.
get a good creamy sauce. Um, and then once that's combined, you just mix it with the mac and cheese in a baking dish and then put that aside, brown up your panko, put that on top, throw it in the oven. You're good. And it's delicious. It's easy, it's delicious. Um, it's it's hard to mess up. A lot of people can struggle with the bechamel sauce
Sure.
because it's just one of those things that it just takes practice. Once you've done it a couple times, you're like, "Oh, this is why." So, a lot of times what will happen is that people have their bechamel will be grainy, and that can happen for a couple times. A couple reasons. You either cooked it at too high of a heat, you didn't mix quick enough, you didn't constantly whisk. So, there's a couple things that can happen. But you make it a couple times and you figure it out, and that's it.
W
Um,
On making the bechamel, would it be better to slowly add the flour instead of just dumping it all in just to kinda help incorporate it better?
well, no, you just want to get it all in there and then just keep when like instantly start whisking. The
Okay.
so what I do first is I melt the butter,
Mhm.
melt it first, then throw the flour in there and just right away start whisking until that's totally combined, and keep whisking till it browns, and then dump the milk in there real quick.
Mhm.
Keep whisking. That really is the key is to keep whisking. And
Okay.
the other very important step is once it starts to bubble, remove it from the heat and then add in your cheese and keep whisking. So what you do is when you remove it from the heat, you're of course you're taking off direct heat, but you're also preventing the cheese and the dairy from overheating and becoming grainy because that's what can happen. If you overheat it, the cheese will break down incorrectly and just becomes kind of grainy. And you don't want that.
Okay.
So that's why removing it from the heat is what you have to do to then add the cheese.
Okay. The only thing that I had to do, or I should have done, I didn't add any salt or pepper during the entire process. Um, it needs a little salt. I
Yeah.
would say like a teaspoon at most, just a
Hmm.
little bit, or maybe even just a pinch. But what
Yeah.
I've done since then is that every time I dish it out, I just put a little
Yeah.
salt on top and just go with it from there. But it does make the dish a little bit better for me. Having grown up on Velveeta,
Hmm.
it's definitely a different taste. It is a
Yeah.
completely different taste, and I noticed the cheese was a little bit. I guess for lack of a better word, it felt more like earthy or woody, if that makes sense. Like it was
Yeah.
like it didn't taste like your preservative ridden
Yeah. Hmm.
box cheese.
Yeah.
So
Because
if you're a cheese nuts, like my wife loves a bunch of different cheeses.
hmm
She thought it was great. She said it needs a little salt, but other than that,
hmm
she loved the flavor.
yeah. So Parmesan, Gruyere, and I don't know so much white cheddar, but the other two, they naturally have like a nutty or earthy flavor that you said.
Hmm. Okay.
Um, just because that's one of the flavors a lot of cheeses will gain when they're is it, I don't know if it's called fermenting when it's cheese.
Just aging.
Aging, yeah. Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
fermenting. That'd be gross.
I mean, it is. Hey man, how you eat your cheese is how you eat your cheese.
I like a nice fermented sharp cheddar.
But yes, good overall. Like I
Nice.
said, the 7-year-old it passed the test. He's the cheese expert.
Yeah, there you go.
Mac and cheese is his thing.
Father, this mac and cheese is not up to snuff. Please move it along.
Next.
I would
Uh,
like my craft dinner right now.
but yeah, good dish. Pretty short and so this is definitely something you can grab and go to a meeting, like a group of people, a great,
Yeah,
potluck, like you said earlier,
yeah,
kind of situation. You got to bring something to a communal meal. Perfect side
yeah.
dish.
And also the cool thing about this is that you don't have to use the cheeses I used. You can use any cheese you want as long as you follow the steps with the bechamel and how you add the cheese into the sauce. You want to go all super sharp cheddar? Go for it. Try it out.
Hmm.
You want to do Parmesan and cheddar? You want to do brie, just a brie mac and cheese? Go for it. Like just do whatever you want.
Could you even mix up your noodles,
What do you mean?
like different types of noodles,
Yeah, yeah.
other than elbow?
Yeah, you just don't want to use like spaghetti or angel hair. You don't want to use
Sure.
long noodles, but yeah, you can use whatever. If you can use shells, that you can use the little twisty ones. Just yeah,
Kava tapi?
I think
Kava,
that's what the something like that.
yeah, something like that. And then like bow ties, just stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, you can use all those smaller, shorter noodles. It doesn't matter. I mean,
Cool.
the main thing about the recipe is making the bechamel and the Mornay sauce. If you get those done, parboil whatever noodle you're using, then combine it and bake it. You're good.
Cool. All right, man. Well, it's short, simple, straight to the point. I love it.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one. So now everyone has to go make it.
Yeah, get your mac and cheese on. I mean, unless you're lactose intolerant, this is a good dish. I mean, even if you are lactose intolerant, just power through.
Yeah, just pop a whatever lactose intolerant pill you have. Just go to town.
uh, one
Yeah,
last question. Could
yeah,
you add any like vegetables or even meat
yeah,
to this if you wanted to?
yeah. So one version I make is I'll do a pork belly mac and cheese.
Oh, that sounds good.
So I get a pork belly and then I'll roast it so the skin gets very crispy, and then I'll add that in right before I put it in the oven. So you get like chunks of pork belly in there. Or you can
Hmm.
add bacon in it. You can do whatever you want, really.
Just pre-cook all that stuff and then throw it in when you bake it.
Yeah,
Cool.
that's it.
All right. Well, brother man, we've reached the end for me. I guess we're good.
Yeah, yeah. Another one in the books.
All right. Well, let's tell these people where to find
Okay, okay.
us. I always like, why do you look at me like, all right, you pretentious jerk. I'll whatever. I'll
Fine.
dance for
I'll
you.
I'll be the monkey.
Look at
Uh
me, people. Look at me.
so you can find us. Now you're in my head. I just can't get through it. I can't do
Yeah,
it. I'm leaving.
I'm just evaluating. Let's see how you do here.
So all the socials, we're hot and hotter on all of our socials, Twitter, Instagram. We have a Facebook, but I don't do anything with it, and I should. You can get our audio podcast everywhere you get podcasts. So Spotify, Apple, wherever you do that. The video, you can get our video podcast on our YouTube channel, Hot and Hotter. And then we also have a website, hotandhotter.com, where you get our recipes and podcasts. And yeah, that's it. That's all the spots. That's all the things. They've been
All
plugged.
the things. Okay. Well, that's all I got, brother man. I'm good.
All right, man. All right, well, keep cooking, y'all. Bye.
See ya.